Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
What's up, Doom Nation? We are back once again, and you are listening to the Two Doom Men podcast. As always, it's Skaggs and Captain, and we have another special episode for you today with another special guest returning. Skaggs, what's up? You want to introduce our guest?
Yes, sir. We have the man, the myth, the legend. Professor Nicholas Giordano is back for the third time on Two Doom Men podcast. Thank you for joining us, Professor Nick. How are you?
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on. We're glad to have you back.
Yeah, so it's a good time to talk to the professor, right? Student loan forgiveness, a whole bunch of interesting topics to dive into. So I thought you were the perfect person to kind of pick your brain on some of these things.
Well, it's complete insanity what we're seeing.
Yeah,
definitely. So, I mean, let's just get right into it, right? What do you think?
Sure.
Cap?
Yeah.
I want to get your vibe on the student loan forgiveness plan that President Biden is putting forward, right? You're a college professor. Right. So this is going to affect you in some way or another, more directly probably than a lot of us. So it's going to affect everybody to some extent. So just as a general overview, what do you think about this whole idea of it? I've learned a lot from you, too. You've changed my perspective just in general on the whole idea of student loan forgiveness. So what do you think about what's been going on?
Well, I mean, let's just be honest here and call it what it is. It's nothing more than a vote buying scheme before the midterm elections. I mean, we're 60 days out from the midterm elections. And Biden and his handlers, they see the poll numbers of the youth vote, that the youth vote, they're unimpressed with him. They don't necessarily like him. And if the youth vote doesn't turn out, that's obviously going to hurt the Democrats because many young people vote Democrat. So this was something that was completely designed in a fraudulent way to get votes. And this is the problem within government that we see. It's government's constantly doing things that normal people would be arrested and thrown in jail for. So if I went to someone and I say, hey, I'm going to take care, I'm running for office, I'm going to take care and make one mortgage payment for you. I'm not going to tell you to vote for me, but if you want to, feel free to. Then I'm going to jail for that. There are numerous statutes against it. But more importantly, it's actually unconstitutional. I mean, when we're looking at this whole thing, the Constitution is explicit. You have Article 1, Section 8, subsection 1, that talks about Congress is the one with the authority to tax. And then you have Article 1, Section 9, I believe it's subsection 7, that says Congress is the one that makes appropriations, spending money ascertained by law, which Congress is the one that passes law. So this is completely unconstitutional. Not that this administration cares about the Constitution, but even Speaker Pelosi recognized that this is unconstitutional when she gave a statement saying that the president does have the power to delay student loan repayments in national emergency, but he doesn't have the power to forgive debt. He doesn't have the power to cancel debt. And I hate using the word cancel because it's not like that debt evaporates. It has to be paid by someone, and it gets paid by the taxpayers. Now, the question becomes, how is the president and his administration justifying wiping away this debt? And they're pointing to the 2003 HEROES Act. In the HEROES Act, which was developed after 9/11, when we were at war in Afghanistan, about to go to war in Iraq, you had hundreds of thousands of soldiers that were switched to active duty that were going to be going overseas, fighting in war. Many of them would sustain life-altering injuries. Other soldiers would be returning in body bags, in flag-draped coffins. And so the least we could do is that while they're in the theater of war, we could suspend their payments, their student loan payments, so they wouldn't have to pay them as they're fighting on the battlefield. So they wouldn't have to fall behind on these loans. And it explicitly states that it's for soldiers, U.S. military personnel. What President Biden did was just this blanket, I'm going to cancel $20,000 if you have Pell Grants and up to $10,000 for other federal loans. And it's a slap in the face to every single American that either sacrificed, worked their butts off to pay for their college, families that were parents working 2 jobs, parents not going on vacation, all because they wanted their child to graduate debt-free. You have people that never went to college to learn a trade. And then you have people that got their student loans, paid those student loans back, or they refinance them into a private loan, consolidated and
Right.
refinance them for a lower interest rate, which is what I did. So this
now
I
they're
don't
shit out of
qualify
luck,
for this
right?
Yeah.
I'm screwed because of that. Now, I thought I was doing the responsible thing, but in Biden's America, doing the responsible thing, you get punished for that.
Yeah.
And instead, it's something that we should celebrate when people pay back their loans. They made an investment in themselves. And if anyone's going to be on the hook for these loans, shouldn't it be the universities that offer useless degrees where people can't get careers? So I don't begrudge the people who get it that are going to benefit from this, if it's, which I think it will be declared unconstitutional. But I don't begrudge anyone that has a student loan that's going to benefit from this. Good for them. I wish I was part of that category. I'm not, but I wish I was. However, I do slam this administration for what they're doing, because it's so cheap and it's so obvious and it's so blatant, and it does nothing to solve the tuition crisis. It does nothing to solve the student debt crisis. It does nothing to solve how we're seeing higher education fundamentally collapse because it's deviated from its actual mission.
Yeah, this is something I've talked about a lot recently too, like putting on my Democrat political strategist hat. They haven't done anything that a lot of the far left or Democrats wanted, like the student loan forgiveness or Medicare for all, a lot of those more socialist programs. So I do see this as like the election is coming. You have to give them some sort of bone to like kind of like rile up their own base, I guess. You could even call the far socialist Joe Biden's base. So it is kind of cheap, honestly. I do want to say too, Professor Giordano, you really changed my mind on this maybe a year or two ago when I heard you talking about how a lot of the colleges have those endowments, and forgiving the loan would just be giving the college like an infusion of cash, or the bank or whoever's holding these loans. I mean, it's just socialism for already rich people, which is apparently progressives are against that sort of thing, aren't they? But they seem to always be
used to be.
They seem to always be supporting policies that do the exact opposite. It's just bizarre.
It is bizarre. And one of the things that, I would much rather see someone that racked up $100,000 in medical bills because they got cancer. You want to talk about debt forgiveness? I mean, maybe we should look at that. But as far as education goes, students signed on to these loans. Students knew that in return for an education, which may lead to a better career, that they're responsible for repaying these loans. And let's just look at the Biden administration in terms of who qualifies for this. So anyone that's single making $125,000 or under will qualify for this benefit. And married couples making $250,000, $250,000 per year, will benefit from this program. Listen, I hate paying back my student loans. I don't mind it because it's an investment in myself and I agreed to the terms of the loan. But if you're making $125,000 a year as a single person, there is no excuse for not being able to pay off your loan. If you're making $250,000 as a married couple, there is no excuse for not paying your loan. It's called responsibility. Maybe don't get that $800 a month monthly car payment because you want to drive a Cadillac Escalade, and instead choose maybe a used car where you're only paying $200 a month or $300 a month. Maybe people need to start looking at that. When you hear students, because there's some students that are very bitter. I mean, think about if you are a new college student today, you're entering in the fall of 2022. Well, guess what? You don't qualify for this program.
Really? That was going to be my follow-up question to you that I deleted before. It was like, how are the students this semester feel about this whole thing? But you said school hasn't started yet. So maybe you haven't been able to get their
But it doesn't matter because they wouldn't qualify. This is for people that are currently in repayment status, that have their student loans and that are already repaying them. So when you're looking at this, if I'm a new student coming in, I'm going to be very bitter because just because I didn't make the date that they wanted. And this is why I hate government programs like this, because it's so arbitrary. And we see this with things like unemployment during COVID, right? So if you were laid off during X amount of time, you were able to get $1,000 a week. But if you were laid off 6 months later, you were only able to get $600 a week. Why? Because you didn't have the fortune to get laid off earlier. I mean, this is how dumb and illogical government is. And yet people constantly look to government to solve problems, and they just create it, and understand that this has far-reaching ramifications. It's not just that this money is now going to be added to our national debt. So every American now has to pay these $10,000 or $20,000 grants to people, but we're going to end up increasing the interest on the debt because of that. So we're going to be paying interest on this debt. More importantly, we see inflation's already in hyperdrive. This is going to add to that inflation because we don't have the money. We got to print it. We're going to inject it in. And we have to be careful what we wish for, right? So if you're a student that's getting this benefit, good for you. You got a benefit. Again, I don't begrudge you. But remember when the stimulus checks were going out for coronavirus? Well, didn't we kind of pay that money back and some with all the inflation it caused? And this is going to do the same thing. So if you don't have a student loan, you're totally screwed. Or if you switch to a private loan or you paid for college, you're totally screwed because you're going to be paying the loans off and you're going to be suffering from the inflation it causes, the extra inflation it causes. If you have a student loan and you do benefit from this program, I could guarantee you when all is said and done, you're going to be paying more for the increased cost of everything than the $10,000 that you're going to get to cover part of your student loan.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So two parts now. So there's a whole generation of people that don't make the date or the cutoff for this to benefit from this. So what's the long-term plan? Because one thing I've realized with this administration, there is no long-term fix. Are we just going to plan to do this again in another 10 years, 5 years, 20 years? And then also, have you spoken to any of your students that might be benefiting from this? Like, what do like actual students feel like if you've spoken to any?
Well, I'll answer both those questions. So if we look at your first question, I think that there are some within the Democrat Party, and we hear them constantly saying that the president didn't go far enough, that it should have been $50,000, that we should just, magically erase all these people's loans. Like we live in a fairy tale. Let's pay everyone's mortgage, their car loans, their student loans. I mean, that's what it becomes.
I think
my car loan, that identifies as a student loan, fuck it.
I think there's something.
See, I bought a used car, so I don't have a car payment. So I sacrificed getting the used car so I could pay back my student loan.
Yeah.
That's called fiscal responsibility, right? Something that's foreign to most people now. I think there's something in there in terms of how, some Democrats would just forgive everything, right? You didn't go far enough. But the fact that they don't, I mean, well, then why don't you, right? It's because if you do print too much money and you do spend too much money and you inject all of the stuff, that does cause inflation, that does harm the economy, which they never admit, right? But it's right there. The proof is in the pudding. Like if it really didn't, then why don't you just print everything and spend everything you want, unlimited, right? Spend $1 trillion, unlimited amount of money, right? But even within their own logic, like there are boundaries to spending and printing. They'll just never say it.
But there's not really boundaries, because what they do, they say, oh, yeah, you can't spend all that money. So we'll just do it slowly and incrementally. We'll keep on spending that money. So, all right, you're not going to collapse the system tomorrow. You're just kicking the can down the road. And that's part of the problem here, that they don't look at, we're Americans. And let's be honest, the American culture, we're not long-term thinkers. We're not long-term planners, whether it's in government or we live for the day pretty much. And unfortunately, people don't realize, like, sooner or later, it's going to hit the fan. Sooner or later, it is going to collapse. And we have a choice that we have to make now. Either we cut every government program by, let's say, 10, 15% and start getting the fiscal house in order. And it's going to be painful. I'm not going to sit here and deny that. We will feel that. But at the same time, it's either we make those small incremental cuts right now and we'll be fiscally solvent 20, 30, 40 years from now, or we wait and 20, 30, 40 years from now, we have to gut entire programs. We won't even be able to offer these programs. And that's what they're doing, because they'll be dead. They won't be in office anymore, and they're not going to be held responsible for it. Unfortunately, we have to suffer the policies that they put into place. Now, I haven't spoken to my students about this. However, what I suspect is if some of them are going to benefit from it, they're going to say, all right, fine, I'll take the money. I'm happy to take the money. And I'm so happy that I got the money. However, I do believe that there are students that are going to get the money. They'll still accept it, but they know it's wrong. They know that this shouldn't be the way forward. Instead of racking up $150,000 in student loans to get a Caribbean studies degree. Why don't we sit there and say, all right, any college that's offering useless classes like in Taylor Swift or Harry Styles, and they're offering useless degrees, well, then the responsibility should be on the college. And we have to look at the student body and see, what are they majoring in? I mean, why do we have so many students that have taken out so much of a loan? And how come nobody's educating them on, hey,
Right.
if you want to be a teacher, it's not a good idea to take out $150,000 in student loans.
Yeah.
If you want to be a doctor, well, that's a different story. Then you may want to take out the $150,000. And I can't understand why more people don't look at that from students that are getting it. Financial aid department should be advising students on this. And then you factor in how tuition is even calculated. Most colleges still go by the traditional model where they charge per credit you're taking. And 12 credits is the full time, and that's what they charge. Why are we doing that? I mean, let's look at it logically. If I am going to New York University, for instance, and you have two people, one's majoring in engineering, one's majoring in education. Now, over the course of the lifetime of those individuals, the engineer is going to make $3.5 million, and the teacher is going to make $1.8 million. That's a big difference. So why is the engineer major paying the same tuition rate as the teacher? That doesn't make any sense. And so why don't we base tuition rates on the careers, on the occupations? And the reason they don't do that is because half the majors would be eliminated if they did that, right? Yeah. If I told you, hey, a woman studied major, well, we're only going to be able to charge $10 for that because there's no real career field for women's studies. Like, you're not going to graduate with a women's studies degree and end up and find a full-time career that's going to last you a lifetime. The only way you can use the women's studies degree is in academia.
Hey, Doom Nation, it's Gags here, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Two Doom Men. If you like what we are about, help us spread the message by subscribing to our channels and sharing the show with your friends. That's the best way we can get around big tech's algorithms. You can also help support the work we do by subscribing to our Patreon account at patreon.com/2doommen or by going to linktree.com/2doommen. That will bring you to everywhere our show has a presence. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Yeah. I think it's time to admit that colleges and universities, outside of being an indoctrination camp, is just one big money-making scheme. Because now I got to figure, with the debt forgiveness going down by $10,000 per person, let's say, aren't they just going to raise tuition as well? I mean, tuition's still going to go up next year. And with inflation, isn't it going to go up regardless?
Probably, but my salary doesn't go up along with inflation. Exactly. I'll tell you that right now. But you're absolutely correct. The more money that gets injected into the higher education system from the government, the higher the tuition rates go. So if you look at tuition rates over the course of the last 30 years, and the reason I say the last 30 years is because starting in the late 80s, early 90s, that's when the federal government really took over the student loan program. And most of these private lenders said, we're out. We're not getting involved anymore. When the federal government guaranteed student loans, you look at tuition increases, and it was exponential, much higher than the cost of living adjustments each and every year, much higher than inflation every year. If we look at the average inflation rate, and I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but if we look at the average inflation rate over the last 30 years, if it's like maybe 3.5%, 4%, tuition rates have risen about 10, 15% during the same time period. Mm-hmm. That's not the way it's supposed to be. But the colleges, they were nefarious in this. And listen, we got to call out the higher education institutions. Just because I belong in academia doesn't mean I can't call them out. They were nefarious. They figured, hey, students are going to be getting this money anyway. Students are going to be able to take out these loans. And so really we can jack up tuition because they'll just take out. I mean, you're not going to sit there and be on your third year. They jack up tuition 10% and say, I'm not going anymore. It's not going to follow through that way.
Most likely.
So they knew that, hey, as the government's guaranteeing these loans, we could jack tuition up. And it's ironic because if you look at academia and higher education, obviously they're far leftist. There's no doubt about it. They're constantly railing about socialism, yet they really love the way the capitalist system works when it comes to academia, right? I mean, you look at all these people in academia. Biden, when he was making his announcement of the student loan program, he comes out there and says, oh, we got to hold these colleges accountable for charging to all this money in tuition. Who are these colleges voting for? Like, if you look at the staffs of these colleges, I could assure you that in most four-year universities, 96% of them are voting for Biden, are voting for Democrats, are contributing dollars to Democrats as they have their millions upon millions of billions of dollars in endowments. And so it's like, who are you kidding? If you really wanted to help students, if you really wanted to solve the student loan crisis, you target the tuition rates, you target the schools, and you'd say that, hey, if colleges are coming out there and making you all these promises of getting a job, well, then they should have a stake in your career. They should have a stake in your outcome. Now, again, there's personal responsibility, so you can't hold colleges accountable for morons. There are people that are just dumb out there. But at the same time, if the colleges are going to offer dumb majors, if colleges are going to say, we guarantee that we're going to get you a job once you graduate because you got this piece of paper, and they're not fulfilling their end of the bargain, well, isn't that a misrepresentation? Isn't that false advertising? And shouldn't they be held liable for that false advertising?
I would like to hold my college accountable for that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's a big part of the problem. I mean, when you're looking at it, academia is killing itself. It's committing suicide through self-inflicted wounds. The reason that people are questioning the value of college degrees is because of the cost versus benefit analysis. For a lot of people, it doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah, and then, why am I going to send my kids to a far left institution where they're going to try and indoctrinate them? For what? And they're not going to be able to, they're going to work as a grocer in Target or something. I mean, come on now, that's not worth it.
I saw on Instagram, it was such a wild quote that he said. He's like, it's the weirdest thing. He's like, people who go to college for 4 years and take out all this money and get a job for 30, 40 grand a year, look down on guys who didn't go to college and are down the street working the construction site, making 80, 90 grand a year. He's like, it's the oddest thing in the world.
Well, we're living in an opposite world now.
Yes.
I mean, that's what it's come down to.
Yeah. It's funny because you're almost like answering every question before I even get a chance to ask it. But one of the things I wanted to kind of ask and say is that, the cost benefit analysis of this, there's information I think that a lot of people are not taking from the whole student loan debt. There is so much debt. Obviously, that means people can't pay their debt back, right? There's some information there that your degree is worthless. It's not getting you a job that you can afford to pay back that loan.
Well, I would say there's two categories. So I just want to jump in for a minute because I put people into two categories. There's people that are taking out so much money in student loans that they can't afford to pay it back because the careers that they chose aren't, if you want to go into theater and acting, a 4-year degree, again, you're going to pay the same amount as almost the engineer. And most people aren't going to hit it big. You're not going to become the next movie star that's going to make millions of dollars. So most people are going to fall starting. You make nothing in the theater industry in Hollywood or anything. And so you have that category where they took out so much student loans that they can't afford to pay it back. Then you have the other category, though. And this is where people live largely irresponsible. When we look at all the things that we spend money on each and every month, half the people that are paying these loans or say they can't pay these loans, most of them will probably have Netflix accounts. Most of them will probably have Sirius XM. Most of them will be paying $400, $500, $600, $700 for a very nice car. I mean, if you look at the monthly payments on everything they're spending money on, it's exorbitant. And they say, well, I can't get rid of Netflix.
Right.
I can't get rid of Amazon Prime.
I seen a meme of this, and it's like a kid, and his face is just above water, and he's like, he's drowning. He's like, I can't afford my student loans, and then underneath the water is Netflix, high car payment, Amazon Prime, etc. Starbucks, right? Buying sandwiches for lunch every day. That was under there, right? All of those things, but yeah, you're right. You can't pay that back. Yeah, it's a really bizarre thing, and it's just a cultural shift that's occurred where there's no personal accountability for anything. And the government is like fostering that sort of behavior behind the scenes towards everybody as well.
Yeah, they reward bad behavior and
Right,
punish good
right.
behavior. You know,
And on top of
consolidate
it-
your student loans with a private lender, and you get shafted.
Yeah.
And on top of it, no one in the school, I mean, unless you start taking finance classes, you know, nobody teaches you about loans and taxation and money, you know, being physically responsible and stuff like that. It's almost like, you know, you have to go and learn that on your own. You go to school all your entire life so you could get a good job, but they never once teach you how to like balance a checkbook, leverage your credit card. You know what I mean? Like, don't go into debt, pay your
that
bills.
stuff should be in like
And you
senior
ever
year of high
notice that
school.
the more education someone has, the less common sense they have?
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
interesting how that actually works. But
I thought that was so shocking during COVID. I couldn't believe people who I held in such high esteem of geniuses and just such smart people just fall for some of the dumbest COVID policies and the whole COVID regime.
But not only
Hook, line,
fall
and sinker.
for it.
Shocking.
I mean, to
religiously accepted as
you
the
have
truth.
all these, like, let's be honest here. You know, all right, Fauci, he's nefarious. I think he should be prosecuted for the things he's done. But when you look at it, like, there's all these people in the health field, in the medical field, and the scientific field that are extraordinarily smart, that were susceptible to groupthink. Like, I don't look at my own doctor in the same light as I used to look at him.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
and it amazes me. Like, we see all these, and it's the same thing in academia. You have this groupthink occurs. Listen, first of all, for most jobs, a 2-year school is sufficient. I mean, so if you want to be a police officer, I don't know a single police force that requires a 4-year degree. I mean, maybe there's one out there, but most of them require 60 college credits and that's it. So why are you going to a 4-year school, taking out $125,000 or $100,000 in student loans to be a police officer?
Right.
Why not just go to a 2-year school where, I don't know, what are you going to spend? $10,000? That's manageable. Could pay that.
Right. You're going to make like
And-
$40,000 a year working for like the NYPD starting out.
Absolutely. And
If you go to
even so-
Westchester, it's like 70, 80. So
well, that's a good deal. Same thing in Suffolk and Nassau County. But when we're looking at it, those are the types of things. And it's like, no, nobody teaches students this. And I try and tell my students this in my classroom so that they're aware, because they're already smart, because they're starting out at a community college. I know people like to, you know, downplay community colleges, but you're smart if you're starting out in a community college. Save yourself a ton of money. But at the same time, I mean, one, I shouldn't have to teach it. Two, I mean, there does come a point where we're responsible for ourselves. And so there are certain things that we shouldn't have to be taught, that we should do automatically. Unfortunately, we live in this entitlement culture that exists out there where we make all these demands on government, where we put all these burdens on government, and where we think we're entitled to everything. Listen, the only thing that we should be entitled is good roads, because the roads here in New York are absolutely horrendous. It's like frigging craters, not even potholes anymore. Now
surface of the
craters.
moon.
I mean, even the Long Island Expressway, they just repaved it, and you could see the seams in the asphalt where it's going to break apart within a year.
Yeah.
That's
Well, we did a couple months ago or a month ago. We went down to Long Island to do a review with our buddy Jerry of a cigar. And man, I mean, it's like driving on the moon going down there. I'm up in Connecticut now. It's not the best
an obstacle course.
It's not the best up in Connecticut, but man, it was just shocking to go all the way out into Long Island and back into New York and see it, just like the condition that roads are in.
Yeah.
It actually messed up my truck a little bit. Since then,
But
my truck hasn't been
that's
driving the
the
same.
very basic function of government, right? Is good roads. That's like one of the simple things. It doesn't take rocket science to figure out, you know, okay, a little asphalt or concrete, whatever you need, the amount of workers you need, the time you need. That's a simple job we give to government, and they can't even do that right. You know, we expect good roads, especially when you're paying so much in friggin' taxes each and every year. We expect police forces. We expect law and order. We're not getting that anymore either. We see crime surging. We expect good schools. We expect schools to teach about American history, where students understand the roles and responsibilities of government. Well, that's out the window, because when I know firsthand on the front lines that they don't have a clue about how our government operates, who's responsible for what. They have no clue about federal government versus state government. They never even read the Constitution. So we give government these jobs, and they can't even do those correctly. And then we look to government when a problem arises and say, you got to solve this. Well, they didn't solve all those other things. What makes you think that they could solve these problems? And at what point do we have to start looking internally within the local communities and say, hey, we need to figure out the problem?
Oh, I think we're past that point and need to start doing that immediately.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. All these things you're saying have changed my perspective so far in the past 2 years since we started doing the podcast, where now like I've radically shifted to like a libertarian anarchist capitalist. I think privatization.
So you're a domestic terrorist.
Yes, I am now. I've been classified by the FBI as an ANCAP. I'm a terrorist, but yeah, like they can't even pave the roads right. Like if we privatized everything, there would be definitely, better results. I think it'd be an interesting experiment, like you've spoken about before, where let's try a little experiment in one area and see how it works as opposed to another. Like California, you want to do Medicare for all and pay for everyone's healthcare? Go ahead, do it. We'll see what happens. Or perhaps in New Hampshire, we'll create an ANCAP society where everything's privatized and based on the free market, and let's hold the two up and see what happens. Who's more successful? Who's more prosperous? So, yeah, like the past 2 years have really just completely pushed me to the furthest right, I guess you could say you could possibly go.
That's the way it used to be, right? The states were the laboratories of experiment, that every state's going to implement their own policies to try things. And if it doesn't work in another state, none of the other states are going to adopt it. If it works, other states will adopt it. But at least we don't screw up the entire country in the process, right? So if California wants to do a Medicaid for all, let them do it. They say that they believe in Medicaid for all, yet they don't do it. They want the federal government to do it. So basically screw the entire country. No, let's let California screw itself and not damage the rest of the country. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, again, we're living in bizarre times where you have the governor of California. Remember, the guy that schools were shut down for almost 2 years. They had mask mandates indoors and outdoors. They had vax mandates. And when I say vax mandates, you got fired from your job in many positions in California. Students couldn't go to school in California if they didn't get vaxxed, little children. I mean, it was completely ridiculous. You have Gavin Newsom, who's constantly violating his own authoritarian decrees. And then he has the nerve to put out a commercial criticizing Florida and saying, people need to come to the free state of California. There's a reason that hundreds of thousands to millions of people have left California over the last 15 years. It's because your state is a friggin' disaster. And yet this guy is going out there making it as if that California is the beacon of freedom, when California is literally the harshest state when it comes to rules and regulations and mandates to exist. It's completely insane. Here's the guy telling people that Florida isn't free, but we're going to outlaw all gas-powered vehicles in the next 10 years and force every single one of our residents to purchase electric vehicles that they can't afford and that aren't ready for prime time. And we're not going to give them a choice. We're just going to force it on them. And I want to see how that plays out. Like, I'm glad California is doing this because I want to see how this huge push for these electric vehicles is really going to work out, because I'm trying to think of places like Los Angeles, places like San Francisco.
Car dependent, right? I mean, the most car dependent place in the world.
But not only are they car dependent,
where are they going to put the stations?
Everything's right on top of each other, right? So, I mean, from the New York area, if you're from imagine like all these apartment buildings. How are you going to plug in 1,000 vehicles?
And remember, California already can't distribute electricity properly. Correct.
So now what's going to happen when teenagers come by and pull the plugs out at night? What happens then? And everyone wakes up and they don't have power in their vehicle, or just where's this space going to be? Like, I'm not on this. Like, imagine New York City. Where are we going to put all these charging stations when you have the Upper East Side people in an apartment building?
Yeah.
This is the problem with the heavy hand of government, right? You can't force something like that to just occur. If they just laid back and let, the free market and capitalism and innovation take place over time, I without a doubt believe that the green technology, solar technology, whatever would be, they'd innovate, they'd become more efficient, cheaper. People would create, better means to charge your car and, things like that. It would just happen naturally, organically, right? But no, they want to force it, and that's going to make everybody poorer. It's going to make
it's a socialist way.
Yeah,
they're socially engineering the economy. I was arguing with someone the other day because they called me a capitalist pig,
Oh, God.
And I was like, capital is big. And they're like, see, this is the problem with America, that America has capitalism. I'm like, whoa.
They don't even know what capitalism is, probably.
We don't have capitalism.
Right.
And it's clear every single day when you have all these government subsidies going out to certain industries and they pick the winners and losers, when you have governors declare which businesses are essential and which ones aren't, that's not capitalism. When you have the government, the Biden administration, knowingly jacking up energy prices because they want to push people to green energy, that's an artificial manipulation of the economy. That's social engineering our economy. In the Inflation Reduction Act, the garbage bill that is, President Biden and Democrats are touting that we now have price controls on medications for people. Well, first of all, price controls is not a capitalistic concept, but the amazing part is, no, we don't have price controls. Here's what the government did. They extorted the big pharma. Now, I'm not a fan of big pharma, especially now, right? Especially after the whole COVID thing. But basically, you had the Biden administration. In this bill, it says that pharmaceutical companies, they don't have to agree with the price controls. They don't have to sign on to the price controls. However, if they don't, they're going to be taxed at a rate of 95%. So you either do what we want you to do, or we're going to punish you and tax you 95%. I'm sorry, that's not a capitalistic model.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that pharmaceutical companies are great. I think that, you know, with the whole EpiPen situation where the guy bought the company and jacked up the price, that was disgraceful. And there has to be some responsibility within capitalism. But let's not pretend we live in a capitalist society. We don't. We are moving towards socialism. And there's so many stupid people out there. You know, if you read the Green New Deal, it says that we're going to have a stake in ownership in all these gas and oil, green energy, or whatever industry you want. We're going to have a stake. No, you're not. You're going to elect people and they're going to benefit from it. You are not going to have any stake in it. Do you really believe that the government's going to hold council meetings once a week saying who should be hired and fired at Michelin or at Ford or GM or anywhere? And the answer is no.
Like a round table.
The janitor is not going to be making decisions about the direction of a company that, you know, is creating microchips. Let's be honest.
Nor would they even be qualified. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't even make any logical sense. This has been tried so many times in human history, and it's failed every time. But no, this time we're going to do it right. This time it's going to be done right. It's going to be done right this time. We'll do every it right. time. Yeah. One thing I've learned about socialism in the past couple of years is it can't survive without being a leech on capitalism, right? Even
but also destroying societies.
Yes,
and there's something that nobody's talking about. A few people are, but very rarely. I mean, so you have all these smart people, right? And I put smart in quotes because they're not all smart, that are in these policy-making positions. You have all these smart people in the scientific community. They're the ones that are pushing this green energy, right? 99.5% scientists agree about climate change. It's going to destroy us and everything. And so they're the ones driving the policy, not the farmers. They're not driving the policy in agriculture. It's people that never picked up a rake or a shovel, never planted anything. They're determining the fishing industry. And so what are they doing? Well, they're destroying these industries. And we see it throughout the world. We're seeing it in Europe. We're seeing it in places of Asia. And we're going to see it here. So if you're in farming, they want to pass laws to reduce the fertilizers, to reduce the cow emissions. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that you got to cut back on livestock, that you got to cut back on farmland at a time when you're facing shortages. That's probably not a good idea, but it doesn't matter because they're not the farmers and they don't know how to get the stuff to the shelves. You have the fishing industry. We're going to build all these wind turbines on the East Coast. Okay. Obviously, the huge fishing vessels aren't going to be able to like weave in and out of wind turbines. And so you're reducing the area that they can capture fish from. Well, that's an ecological disaster, right? Because if we're fishing in smaller concentrated areas, how long is it going to be before we overfish? And are we even going to be able to make up for the loss of areas that we can't fish in now? And so it's going to be a catastrophic disaster, but it doesn't matter, right? Because we got to operate on emotion. We're saving the world. We're saving the environment. You may starve to death in the process, but you get to eat bugs and
that's the plan, man.
And green meat. I mean, how delicious
that's the plan.
Does that sound?
It's all in the name of saving the world, but we got to die to do it. You know, millions are going to die to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about all the globalist
World Economic Forum
policies here, right? And they
Well, see, they're sinister.
yeah,
And
that's what I was going to ask
exactly.
you, the why, right? Like, why do you think? Because
Yeah.
me and Chris go down this rabbit hole every episode, probably.
Agenda, what, 2030 or something,
Right.
man?
So why do you what do you think is behind that, and why are they putting forth those policies? It ain't about being moral or emotional. Let's just start there.
No,
I want to hear your
first of all, I want to talk about some of those people that actually support those policies because they believe they're saving the world. I want to make it clear that these aren't bad people. The
Sure.
World Economic Forum are bad people. The New World Order people are bad people.
Sure.
But there's so many that push this because they simply operate on emotion and something, it always sounds good, right? Do you want to save the environment? Of course. I want clean air. I want to drink clean water. I mean, who wouldn't want that? So you have people that generally have good intentions. They just don't use their brains. They don't have critical thinking skills and they don't question anything and they just go along with it. And then you have people that are just complete morons out there. Like, I don't ever underestimate the stupidity of people, of government officials. Don't ever underestimate how dumb they are. Sometimes it may seem what they're doing is nefarious, but then you're giving them too much credit. 'Cause then you're saying they're smart, but they're not smart. So many of them are absolutely morons. Then you have the actual smart ones. And so what's in it for them? It's because they've come to believe that they are smarter than ordinary Americans, that they are smarter than the ordinary people in countries around the world, that they are the ones that are the guardians of civilization. This is what they've deluded themselves with. And that people can no longer be trusted to make the right decisions in life. And if they can't be trusted to make the right decisions in life, well, then we have to take the power and force those decisions in life. And at the time that we take the power and force those decisions on the people, we'll also benefit greatly when it comes to monetarily wise. We're going to make a lot of money off this too. But I want to make it clear that most people will say it's about money. No, it's about power. That's what it's about. You have these egotistical people, the same people that constantly scream threat to democracy. They truly believe that they're like the guardians of democracy. And
they don't
order
believe
to
in
keep
democracy
and
at all,
sustain
those
democracy.
It's their democracy, not democracy.
You're
Well,
right.
it's not democracy at all,
Yeah.
but it's like almost like, okay, so they want to destroy democracy because they say they want to save it, but no, that's not the way it works.
Yeah, they want to rebuild it in their image.
With examples of this, that they get the power and then it's much quicker transition going from a free country to an authoritarian country than it is to go from an authoritarian country to a free country. But these people don't have any trust of the people. They don't like the people. They actually have this disdain. They despise us for some reason. And why they despise us, I don't know. I can't understand that because it's ordinary people that have built civilizations. It's ordinary people that have created the world. It's ordinary people that have made countries successful. And it's usually the people in power that have been the ones to destroy things. Like, it's not that hard to see. It's usually governments are the ones that end up destroying societies. It's governments that are ones that end up going to war with other countries, whether needlessly or maybe there's a reason for it. Who knows? It all depends on the conflict we're talking about. But the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and people like Bill Gates, they are a problem. Like, nobody's asking the question. Bill Gates, who constantly talks about depopulation, that we have to reduce the world's population, who is someone that's a vegetarian, who says that we shouldn't be eating meat. We should be eating these plant-based burgers, which are absolutely disgusting.
Oh, they're not all bad. They're not all bad. I found a couple black bean ones that are good, but
you could put salt and pepper, tons of salt and pepper on it, and they still taste horrible. And I love the people that get those plant-based burgers and then they throw on like tons of condiments that have all this crap in it.
Right.
But I'm eating a healthy burger. Yeah, okay.
That's me, but I'm not eating it because of
I usually put bacon on my veggie burgers. So
that's the way it should work. Bacon goes on everything, even veggie burgers. But imagine this guy that says that we shouldn't have meat buying up all this cattle land and farmland. Like, shouldn't that raise a question? Hey, if you don't believe in eating meat, why are you buying all this farmland, especially considering that your expertise is in technology? But nobody asks that question. And if you ask that question, guess what you're labeled?
So that's interesting. We just had this conversation with the Unfit Statesman, Zach. You've been on his show before too, and he kind of asked us about Bill Gates, and and me and Chris both agree in principle that, like, look, in America, you have a right to private property, you have a right to buy land. So in principle, we don't want to say Bill Gates doesn't have a right to buy land if he has the means, and we're supposed to live in a free market. He should be able to, but obviously that's not what's going on.
It needs to be steamrolled through and investigated. But I can't say to go do it, because if I had $1 billion and I bought up the largest farm in America, the last thing I would want is to be investigated.
But what we could say is that journalists could simply ask him the question of why you're buying all this farmland. They could expose it. I mean, the idea that we have private property, it works to a certain degree, but do we really? I mean, just look at the southern border right now. Look at all the private property that are constantly being raided day in, day out by migrants crossing over. And if they put up a wall, they get in trouble. They can't do that. They can't protect their property. They can't hire private security to start detaining migrants. They'd be arrested and thrown in jail. Then we have the concept of eminent domain, where the government could come in and seize your property. It's something where private property exists, but there's also national security issues that exist as well. So in 2006, China wanted to buy a lot of ports on the eastern seaboard.
I remember that.
And the Bush administration actually was going to sell it to China, right? Free market, capitalism, and blah, blah, blah. Congress is like, what the hell? Are you kidding me? You're not selling this to China. Our port system is essential. I mean, the port of New York and New Jersey handles what? Several $100 billion worth of goods every single day coming into and out of the country. I mean, no, we're not going to give it to an adversary, and they have control over our ports. That was a smart decision. Well, we no longer have smart people in office. And so now we're selling farmland to China. We're selling infrastructure to China. I mean, it's truly mind-boggling. So yes, I understand private property, but we still can ask questions and we could still expose it. And hey, you know what? There may be farmers out there that are in talks with Bill Gates for Bill Gates to buy his property that may say, I don't like your intent. So, I'm going to keep my farm right now.
Yeah.
I'll find another buyer that actually appreciates agriculture, that actually wants to feed people what people want to eat.
What do you think is his intention with buying all the property? Like, what's his end goal?
I don't know, because I'm not going to sit here and say that I know exactly what his end goal is. I mean, he reminds me of, it's always the ones that look like the little geeky types. Yeah. And he's really like the Sith Lord, right? On Epstein Island. I mean, you'd never suspect. Everyone looks at the Clintons as if they had Jeffrey Epstein killed, suicided. No, it was probably Bill Gates. No, I'm only kidding about that. But it wouldn't surprise me. I don't know what his intent and motives are, and I'm not going to pretend I know. What I do is raise my concern about it. Here's a guy that wants to control what we eat and believes that we are overpopulated on this planet, and now he's buying farmland. Now, if he was a farmer his whole life,
right, it would make sense.
I would say, okay, he's got a farming background, but he's a software guy. He's not a farming guy. And so it's going to raise suspicions for me.
Yeah.
And same I always say, just ask questions.
Same thing with the vaccine, his involvement in the pandemic and the vaccine. I never understood it. Why am I listening to this guy? He made Word, right? Yeah. He made Excel. How is he somehow a qualified person to tell me what I should or shouldn't put in my body, or
the amazing
influence public policy? I couldn't, and people were like touting him as some sort of hero. I couldn't believe it was insane.
He was one of the first though on Instagram where they had to turn off his comment section and take away anything on his YouTube page for dislikes and stuff. Oh, because this was probably right around the time we started the podcast, early days of COVID. You could go to any picture on his Instagram back then, and it could be like, hey guys, I just bought a pair of new shoes, and it'd be 500,000 comments of you're trying to kill us, we're coming for you, we know you're nefarious. But it was just hundreds of thousands of just these hateful comments the jig's up, we know you're evil.
Well, here's the amazing part. So I was in emergency management and homeland security. I worked for a private company and did work throughout the country. I worked for New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services in their Office of Emergency Management. I was part of catastrophic planning teams. I did pandemic planning in 2011. We developed the Suffolk County pandemic plan. We worked on these catastrophic initiatives. In those planning meetings, we talked about universal masking. And we said, no, universal masking isn't going to work because we know cloth masks don't work. We know surgical masks. So with surgical masks, most people don't realize that surgical masks can only be worn for a total maximum period of 4 hours, right? Now they're constantly telling us we needed to put on masks, but they never told anyone that, hey, it's only for 4 hours. You can wait, and that's at most. The second you touch it, you got to get rid of it. In any event, we talked about it won't work. And it was virologists, epidemiologists, emergency management officials. We talked about the idea of lockdowns. They're not going to work either. And all these things we discussed and talked about, we established in 2011 and 2012 that they weren't going to work, that we shouldn't be doing things like this, that you want to cause the least disruption possible to people's lives and focus the attention on the most vulnerable. Now, when this whole thing hit, and I'm sitting there and I'm criticizing the mask mandates, I'm saying cloth masks don't work and surgical masks don't work and the microplastics in the mask. And then the vaccine, I said, someone wants to get it, it should be their choice. It should be mandated, shouldn't be forced, especially without testing. I was constantly told, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a scientist. You're not someone that's qualified to speak on these issues. Emergency managers disagree with you. Epidemiologists and virologists disagree with you. I'm like, yeah, okay. I worked with these people in 2011, 2012. They were singing a different tune. So something changed in their mindset. And I was constantly slammed that I shouldn't be talking about these topics. I'm spreading misinformation. I'm spreading disinformation. But we're going to listen to friggin' Bill Gates?
Right.
I'm sorry. I have experience in these policy areas. He doesn't. And yet, he's the one they're going to listen to. But even worse than that, well, let's look at what's happened since then. Well, they've now come out, the CDC and the NIH and all these little alphabet agencies came out. Cloth masks have absolutely zero effect and don't work. Oh,
and
I said that.
People still wear them.
Surgical masks. Well, not only do they not work, they could also be hazardous now that we're finding microplastics deep in people's lungs. So we always knew that it was more for an open cavity on an operating table, not just to wear them day in, day out. We're now seeing that the idea of lockdowns was extremely destructive in our society and caused an enormous amount of economic damage, of mental health damage throughout our society that we're going to be dealing with for decades. Then you look at the vaccine, where we were literally firing people, all because they wouldn't get vaccinated. And obviously the vaccine does absolutely nothing. Again, CDC has admitted this, does absolutely nothing to
You
stop
could
the
say
spread
that now?
and transmission.
Professor Giordano, you could say that now because YouTube over the weekend actually just changed their policies where you could actually now say that the vaccine does. Did you save it, Chris? Yeah. They changed the policy and they just deleted a line out of there that said basically you couldn't say that the vaccine doesn't work, or to some extent. So they've now changed that. So now we could basically say that. There's still a million other rules on YouTube at least, but YouTube has changed their policy.
So if we look at where we are today, government has adopted the positions that I had from the beginning. And yet I'm the one that's a domestic terrorist spreading misinformation and disinformation, even though the government had it completely wrong and is now doing what people like myself were calling for the entire time. That's the amazing part. And guess what? The next time it happens, the same thing will happen. Only this time they'll go even further.
I agree. Yeah.
So that's the scary part. But it really is. They
next time's gonna be a fight.
Lives. They destroyed scientists that would question what they were doing. They tried to go after the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. And yet now they adopted all those policies. And they'll never say, hey, not only were we wrong, because I know Walensky's coming out saying, yeah, we got some things wrong. No, they should come out and say, we totally botched it. We overstepped our boundaries. We were completely wrong. And we need to figure out a way that this never, ever, ever happens again.
Yeah,
because it's bizarre to me when you look at what's going on today.
That's where the problem lies. They didn't botch it. Done on purpose. It was done on purpose. This was all part of a greater plan. It was a test run. And not only are they not going to come out and say, we need to make sure this never happens again, they're going to make sure it's worse next time.
They've asked for more resources, right?
Yeah, they want more power.
Yes, it wasn't done well,
CDC,
right? So,
I think the CDC wants the ability to just declare a national emergency whenever they want.
They don't want their recommendations and guidelines. They want their enforcement.
Yeah.
That's the crazy part. So when this, and this is what a weasel Fauci is. Fauci will say, well, I didn't implement any of the mandates. I simply made recommendations. The scumbag that he is.
But he's on camera so many times. Like they, you know, that's where we come in, right? Like podcasters and independent media. We have to grab those clips of those things where he's on camera multiple times saying, no, I advised for this.
But it doesn't matter.
We locked down. I know. But I think it does matter. I think it does matter. I think you do have to show those things. You do have to make those points because once you not everyone, there are people who are just completely head in the sand, right?
Listen,
but if you put that right in their face, it's too on the nose to not spark a critical thought sometimes. But go ahead. What are you going to say?
Listen, on February of 2020 and prior to that, I would have said none of these things would ever happen into the United States. Like if you would have told me the government would issue lockdowns and mask mandates and force people to get vaccinated with a vaccine that wasn't tested at all and blah, 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 that would never happen in the United States. Mm-hmm. Then March 2020 happened. And everything I thought I knew about the United States went out the window. Seeing the reaction and what these people did, but not only seeing the reaction, Fauci is the worst of the worst. Because we have his own emails where he said, no, if you wear a mask, it might make you feel better in your head, but it has no effect. That Fauci was right and he was being honest, but it was the public, that he was concerned about. Even worse than that, we have his emails of him and I believe.
Oh, the CEO of Eco something, right? No,
not Eco Health Systems. It was him and another government official, Dr. Burks, I believe. They're talking about the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration and coordinating how to respond to them, how to destroy their credibility, using government resources to destroy their credibility, even though those people were right the whole time. And that's what makes it so bad. Like even down to our grant funding. Like if you look at all the strings attached with grant funds, the conclusion's already baked into what the government wants, what the powers that be want the answer to be. Try getting a grant if you're going to try and challenge climate change. You're not going to get one. Try getting a grant if you're going to challenge the government's response to COVID. And I could guarantee you're not going to get one. And that's the scariest part. Walensky's like, well, we didn't do everything right. You didn't. But the problem is that they think they didn't go far enough. And Fauci admitted that. He said he would much rather have seen a China-style response than an American style. And that to me is insane. These are the same people that are calling me a semi-fascist. The same ones that wanted to keep your kids out of school, that wanted to force you to wear masks. And, I thought the American people, this can't go on more than like a month or two. The American people will vote. No, most of the American people, the public, accepted it. I don't want to die, they said. I want to be safe. It's just a piece of paper over your face. It's a very big deal. Because
just shows how weak
happened since.
Weak a lot of people are. The people that still wear the masks after all this time.
Oh my God, I still see people in their cars with masks.
The weakest of the weak. The weakest of the weak. I mean, I can maybe understand if you're an Uber driver and you have a lot of strange people getting in and out of your car.
You might want to wear a mask for a different reason then.
Yeah. But outside of that, the amount of people, I went to the grocery store earlier and I mean 5-6 different people in the parking lot wearing masks outside alone. Like, have you not learned one thing in 3 years now?
But it's worse than that. How many tweets? I did a whole episode like 5 weeks ago. How many tweets have we seen where the person's like, oh, I got vaccinated. I got like triple boosted. I wear my mask everywhere. I isolated myself for the last 2.5 years of my life. I get my groceries delivered. I rarely go out the door and associate with any human beings. And I got COVID. We have to be vigilant, they'll say.
Yeah.
We have to. There was one tweet where it was a doctor and he was talking about how he always wears his mask and how he's all these vaccinations and boosts that he have and all this stuff. And then he said, we got to make sure that people are wearing their masks. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're sitting there saying how you got COVID, even though you did you threw away 2 years of your life, isolated yourself for 2 years, and you still got it after doing everything the government told you to do. You should be pissed about that. You shouldn't say, well, I'll get another booster if they recommend one.
I think
it makes sense because I took Advil before and my neck still hurts, but did either of you guys take Advil today?
No, I didn't.
No, I'm good.
Motherfuckers. See what I mean? This is why my neck hurts. God damn it.
Because we didn't take our
people
Advil.
like you.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I think the funniest line from all of those tweets is there's a recycled line that they're all using, and especially people, and say the lines. It's become a meme now of them saying the line where it's I've just tested positive for COVID-19. Thankfully, I've been vaccinated and double boosted, and I'm thankful for the protection the vaccine continues to give. You could change the words a little bit here and there, but it's all kind of the same regurgitated almost script that they're all saying, which is just bizarre, and it's just hypocritical. It's hypocritical.
Government's pushing out.
But I mean, even if you like any logical, critical thinking person could be like, what protection?
Yeah,
that they continue to give. You didn't. You got COVID. Not only are they getting COVID, right, but you're seeing rebound infections now for people with multiple shots, like Biden, like Jill, like Fauci. So they're getting COVID again after they've even recovered from it. It's not happening to normal people.
Sorry. Yeah. My response to that though is like, okay, you're thankful. So the argument is I have the vaccine and the boosters, so therefore I have a lower case of COVID and it's less likely to kill me. But then how come it's just the COVID community that is having the vaccinated community that's having an increase in miscarriages? Why is it the vaccinated athletes are the ones passing out and having heart attacks? Why is it the children, the percentage of children that are vaccinated, again, the heart mitochondria, how do you say it?
Myocarditis.
Myocarditis, right. And it's not the vaccinated people. There's the SADS, sudden adult death syndrome. Widely, vaccinated percentage of people getting that. Why isn't the unvaccinated community?
Well, Chris, those are all symptoms of long COVID, right? You just don't know what you're talking about. Exactly. I saw Matt Walsh tweet this. He's like, okay, just to be clear, right? So anything is a symptom of long COVID.
I sprained my ankle the other day.
But
it's
nothing is a side effect of the vaccine, though. That's what they're saying.
Well, you know what the scary part is? See, we're not doing the studies here in the United States, but they are doing studies around the world. Other countries are doing the studies. And once again, this is how dumb people are. Okay, so the American people, the parents that put masks on their kids, we were actually one of a few countries that put masks on anyone under the age of 12 in school. One of a few countries. So don't tell me you believe in science when all these other countries aren't doing that. More importantly, if we look at the vaccine, multiple countries, and I'm talking about months ago, started banning the vaccine for anyone 30 years old and younger. Now, it wasn't because there was a vaccine shortage and we had to make sure that the elderly and the sick population was taken care of. More than enough vaccines in the world. So why did these governments move to ban the vaccine for anyone 30 years old and younger? And some of them are actually upping it to 40 years old. What do they know that we don't? And we're starting to learn it. So there's now reports, I believe this was a study out of Germany, I believe, where sperm counts are down 20% amongst those that are vaccinated. Well, this is something that's horrifying. In the Western world, what we've known, we don't know why. I think it's because we're emasculating men, but I don't have the scientific answer.
Birth rates are declining in general already.
But not only birth rates. So in Western societies, testosterone rates have declined dramatically in males. Dramatically. And which naturally will lead to lower birth rates. Well, now, how many young, healthy children between the ages of 10 years old to 35 years old did we vaccinate? And if the sperm count stays reduced by 20%, what is that going to mean on top of the already declining testosterone levels that are already existing that are hurting our society and the future of our civilization? Now, nobody really talks about this. You would think that this would actually be big news. You would think that we'd want to do some studies on it. But in the United States, you can't do those studies because you're not going to come to a conclusion that's wanted. And in fact, you'll come to a conclusion that's going to make a lot of people look bad. And that's
you won't
a
get
big
the
part of the
funding
problem.
though for your studies.
and you
won't even
goes
get
against the
funding
agenda.
for it.
No.
Yeah. You
Not
will
at
eat
all.
the bugs, though. That's what you will do. I mean, this goes into the rabbit
Well,
hole
have you
of
noticed more and
conspiracy
more
theory,
headlines about how good
Yeah.
eating bugs is
Cockroach
and how
milk,
they can be
yeah.
tasty? Like, and I'm serious about that. This is where people, they constantly talk about misinformation and disinformation online. You look at the huge amount. You brought up that everyone has these same statements.
Yeah.
I got COVID, but thank God I got vaccinated and boosted, and they're all the same. And now we're seeing headline after headline about how, eating grubs is good and you can fry them up and make butter out of them, which is just nasty. I mean, it's just gross. But we're seeing more and more. So that's the same people pushing these stories out there. Why? Because they want to influence the minds of the masses. That's what it's about.
Yep.
It's about social engineering. It's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, I agree. That's my whole conspiracy theory behind the whole thing is this, together with social media and the state, there's a new sort of MK Ultra program going on here where they are trying to condition everybody. Change your profile picture every month to something new that offends you, right? And it's always in like alignment with that agenda, the state's agenda. That's what I think is going on here. It's a new MK Ultra on the grandest scale imaginable.
But the problem is that they're not all on the same page.
Sure.
So, like when we look at something like big tech isn't a bunch of socialist commies. Big tech doesn't mind socialism or communism because they know that they're going to be the ones to get the contracts in a security state apparatus, right? I mean, how much money are they going to make from that? And that's the thing. It's not like all these corporate leaders are all woke and they're all just corrupt and believe in communism or socialism. Yeah. Every group has their own motives. I mean, take the FBI. Well, I won't go down the whole road, but if you look at the FBI, those people are not far left Democrats. They're not communist or Marxist. They're not trying to push communism or Marxism. They just hated Trump. They felt that Trump wasn't worthy of the office, that he was beneath the dignity of the office, that the American people were stupid and made a mistake, and them being the guardians of democracy had to correct that mistake. So they'll all align themselves with each other. But they all have different motives, whether it's the New World Order, whether the global agenda, whether it's to enrich their own corporations and money. That's what's going to be their downfall, because sooner or later they turn on each other, and that's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, this is a question I wanted to ask you. It's a pretty good segue. So, the FBI raided Trump, and the FBI has this horrible track record. We'll just take the Russia hoax. We know they lied to the FISA court to do what they had to do. If you say abolish the FBI, you're an extremist. There's 87,000 new IRS agents, and they're arming some of them to come collect your tax pennies. If you say get rid of the IRS, you're an extremist. If you don't like the new She-Hulk on Disney, you're a racist bigot.
You're a racist, toxic fan. Yeah. Star Wars, anything. Yeah. Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So can't criticize anymore.
So we're at this point where you can't question the apparatus or you're labeled a terrorist when you're not a terrorist. How do we quote unquote fight back? Because I feel like we're almost being, we'll say the MAGA base is almost being coerced and, sent into a trap to, if we push this community of gun owning nut jobs far enough, somebody's going to snap, and then it makes headline news, and then we could push whatever agenda we want. And January 6th on steroids,
Because of what they're doing, because of what they're saying, they're creating the next Timothy McVeigh. I mean, I hate to say that. I don't want to see any type of violence or anything, but that's what they're doing with their rhetoric. If you look at the progression, I'm about to release an episode, I believe on Wednesday, I'm putting it out there. If you look at the progression of the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism and all the actions of government since then, they lay it out, in 2 months, 3 months, say they did this, and this, all culminating to what Biden said the other day, that they're semi-fascist, they're a threat to democracy, and they want to destroy democracy. Now, stay with me. The president's number one goal by solemn oath, right? Article 2 of the United States Constitution, by solemn oath, is to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution of the United States and our way of life. If the president truly believes that we have and this is his quote, the most extreme political organization to exist in recent American history, if the president truly believes in his administration that they're a threat to democracy, that they want to destroy democracy, and they're semi-fascist, well, as commander-in-chief, isn't it your job to protect, preserve, and defend the Constitution of the United States and our way of life? And so my argument is that we need to pay attention to what's really going on here. Do not be surprised when they try and declare MAGA an official domestic terrorist organization, all because they disagree with their political opponents. But that's the direction it is heading. And there's so many stupid people that play right into the trap, that will do something stupid, that then they'll be like, see, we told you about these threats. I mean, we've been saying this big threat of white supremacy for 15 years now. Well, finally, we had an attack by a white supremacist. We were right. Yeah. We were right. Even though we created that white supremacist, just like we wanted people to kidnap Governor Whitmer, we were right. And they'll use that to acquire more power. It's the left that uses the words when they're talking about political opponents. They use words like purge, re-education, deprogram. I mean, those are all frightening.
Remember words. AOC, we need to make lists.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
And those are all frightening things when you hear them. And so my advice to people is stop being stupid and playing into their trap and making threats to the FBI, and I'm talking about the people that make actual threats. Like, don't be dumb and fall into that trap. What I will tell everyone else is grab your friggin' cojones and stop being so afraid to speak up. If everyone spoke up, it's like college campuses, right? So most people think every single college is filled with far left radicals. No, there's a lot of conservatives on college campuses too. We're outnumbered. I'm not going to deny that. But we're not outnumbered as much as people think. People think like it's all 90% far left and maybe 10% independent and conservative. That's a lie. That's a myth. Half the people that spew the crap they're spewing on colleges' campuses, they don't believe what they're really saying. They just want to fit in, get their tenure. Yeah. They do it for promotions, and they just say what everyone else wants to hear because of groupthink. But the reality is I'm constantly getting emails from other professors. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for taking on this. Thank you for challenging that person. And my response back is simple. Where are you? Why aren't you speaking up? Because if all of us spoke up, guess what? The campus community would be completely different today. Higher education would still be respected today. We'd respect the free flow of ideas, not indoctrination. It's not my job to get my students to believe what I believe. It's my job to make them question things, to make them push themselves, to find evidence, to back up their arguments, and to open their minds to hear from people that disagree with them and actually consider those things. And that's what college is all about. So see, we go full circle here. We start around college. When you look at that, they want to shut us down. And the only way they could shut us down if we keep on being cowards and remaining silent. I don't want to speak up because I want to get that A. I don't want to speak up because I need that promotion. If everyone speaks up, it stops. And if we actually hold politicians accountable that don't use the power of oversight of Congress, that would work too. Once accountability is introduced to the system,
oh boy,
it fixes everything. Like people like, oh, it would be so hard to undo all the corruption that exists within the system. No, it's actually relatively easy.
Oh, I need to hear this. How?
It's honestly the simplest solution in the world. Just go back to federalism. Go back to the original intent. We look at every single agency and department that exists within the federal apparatus, and we determine whether or not they're necessary, whether or not it's within the scope of government, whether or not it's within the parameters that was set forth at the founding of this country. If it's not, and it's a state job, the states handle it and get rid of the federal aspect of it. You do that, every problem gets solved almost immediately. The problem is nobody has the will to do that. And I'm talking about Democrats and Republicans.
I agree.
Nobody has the will to say, you know what, the FBI, you overstepped your boundaries. So what we're going to do is you could still handle analysis of counterintelligence and that sort of thing. But the law enforcement aspect is going to be shifted to the U.S. Marshals, the oldest law enforcement of the federal law enforcement agencies, and the one that usually doesn't have any major controversies, that hasn't been ideological weaponized. I mean, you don't hear about cases of the U.S. Marshals pushing politics and an agenda like you do the FBI. Do that. When Lois Lerner abused a position at the IRS, what happened? Well, the IRS got massive funding cuts. Did the IRS abuse their power after that? Well, no, because they couldn't afford to anymore because they had their funding cut from them. It's actually really simple to solve the problem of government overreach. It's that there's so many that don't have the will. That's the harder part. And it's because you have partly the uniparty aspect of it, where there's no difference between certain Republicans and Democrats on the establishment. You have the far left aspect of it, that they want the government to have all the power and control. And then you have the Republicans that are just simply cowards, that don't want to challenge. They don't want to be branded as domestic terrorists. They still believe that MTG. They're playing in 1980s politics when they don't realize that everything's changed in 2020.
So I think this is a good part to segue into one of my questions, which I've been dying to ask you since November. And I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, maybe not that much, but it's about Dan Crenshaw, who you had on the P.A.S Report.
I did
a while ago,
and I wasn't pleased with some of his answers.
Okay, good, because this is kind of what I'm going to ask you, right? So you had him back on in November, and you guys were kind of talking about like the blatant authoritarianism in government nowadays, just in general. And let me tell you, Professor Giordano, he had a line in the podcast. It almost gave me a stroke when I heard what he had to say. And he said, elections have consequences. Hopefully we can win some so that we can be a speed bump for this administration. And like I said, I almost had a stroke. Libertarians have made this joke all the time. Conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. And it's funny, right? It's funny to me because that's almost exactly what he said. He wants to be a speed bump. I think if we're going to fix a lot of these problems, we can't have that mentality of we're going to just be a speed bump for the runaway regime, progressive agenda and regime. You need radical change. Someone like a Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I've come to respect now over the past couple of months. I really like what she's, been saying and doing and whatnot. And now they're kind of opposed. What are your thoughts on Dan Crenshaw? He's really fallen out of favor with like the America First movement, the MAGA movement.
And he's part of the World Economic Forum.
He is part of the World Economic Forum. You've spoken to him. I've watched him on Joe Rogan's podcast for hours. I used to really like him, but the past year or two, and especially your podcast with him, like I said, I almost had a stroke when I heard him say, I want to be a speed bump.
I'll tell you, I used to respect him and like him too. He lost me though during that interview because I asked him about all the repeated government abuses. I brought up the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism, and his answers were not only vague, where he didn't really answer the question, but what got me annoyed was, well, we don't have the power. Now, if we get into the positions, then we could investigate the Biden administration. And that's not the answer I wanted to hear. It's no, you should be screaming from the rooftops about what the national strategy for countering domestic terrorism does. But the fact is that he doesn't really care what it does because he looks at it as, okay, when we're in power, we could use that to our advantage. And that's the problem. And listen, Congress is always supposed to be a speed bump to a president. They're always supposed to obstruct like people like scream, oh, Congress is obstructionist, blah, blah, blah. That's like the whole point of Congress is to obstruct the president's agenda.
Powers, right? Yeah.
I am so sick of endless hearings that don't really hold any single person accountable. I want to see action. I want to see pieces of legislation like, no, we're removing the law enforcement capacity from the FBI, giving it to the U.S. Marshals, where we're dissolving this government agent. Like, I want to see action and I want to see accountability. I don't want to see endless hearings that, it's going to expose some of the corruption, but nobody's paying attention to that.
Nothing actually changes.
Exactly. Well, why is it going to change? If I get to retire and still keep my pension, why would anything change? And that's the thing. I want to see action. I want to see federalism restored in this country. And if you notice, most Republicans, they don't even talk about the idea of limited government anymore.
No.
Most Republicans don't even talk about the national debt anymore. Not that they can, because they're hypocrites, because they spend just as much money as Democrats when they're in power. But they don't even pretend anymore. They don't even bring it up. Most Republicans today have left the conservative ideology a long time ago and the libertarian ideology. The only person in the United States Senate that I truly think is probably the most remarkable senator, would love to see him as president. I don't think he'll ever have the capability to win his presidency simply because he doesn't have it, is Rand Paul. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that, whether you disagree with some of his policy positions or not, you want to talk about a guy that stands on principle. How many Republican bills has he voted against because it went against Republican conservative principles?
Right.
Tons. He's one of a few that will buck his party, buck the Democrat Party, because he's a man of principle. We need to elect more people like that than the Dan Crenshaws of the world, where Dan Crenshaw, oh, well, it's just politics and we don't have the power, so they could do what they want right now. And it's like, no, that's why
that's not good enough. Yeah.
Well, not only is it not good enough, that's why you're not in power.
Yeah. You could say no comment if you want. This is more of the conspiracy side of me coming out. In getting to know Dan, I mean, is he getting the email in the morning from Klaus? Like, do you think he's established? Do you think he's a rhino? Like, I'm sure there's some type of blood on his hands and it didn't come from war.
No, see, I don't think that. I mean, I don't necessarily look at him, and I don't question people's motives till they do something where I really have evidence where I could say, there, I got you. You know, so I don't want to question his integrity, and I do respect the fact that he did fight in a war for us, and he did get injured in that war for us. You know, whether the merits of the war could be debated. But I think Dan Crenshaw is someone, and I think this is the problem with a lot of Republicans. They live in this world where it's almost as if it's the 1960s and 1970s, where Democrats and Republicans could both agree that America is the greatest country, that we were founded for good intentions, for good reasons, that we're that shining city on the hill. Might have disagreed on the policy issues, but we didn't necessarily question the motives of the political parties. You look at something like corporate America, like Dan Crenshaw is the type of person to still believe that, hey, we got to be nice to the corporations because they fund us. No, they don't. If you notice, the corporate funding has gone all the Democrats' way. Like the corporate America is for Democrats now. There's no disputing that. Big money is for Democrats now. There is no disputing that. And so I think Dan Crenshaw is living in another time where he doesn't realize the nefarious of the left. He doesn't realize the nefarious of what's really going on. He doesn't realize, he thinks that the media simply has a liberal bias. He doesn't realize that the media it's political activists. They're not journalists anymore. They're political activists pushing a political agenda. He looks at the FBI and he looks at it like there may be a few bad apples in there, but it's not a corrupt agency, where it's like, no, the agency has been corrupted by the senior leadership of the FBI. And so I think that
in that case, he's a little too naive for the position he is put in.
But I think
looking at the FBI is so egregious. They've always, for the most part, been a political.
But it's not just the FBI.
Agency. Yeah.
That's the problem. I mean, most people don't know that the United States Postal Service had a program called ICOP, where they were monitoring America's social media accounts and then sending that information to the Department of Homeland Security. The Inspector General of the Postal Service said that the program was illegal. The program was illegal. Nobody was held accountable. If you look at the CIA in 2014, they got caught spying on sitting members of the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. Nobody was held accountable. That's highly illegal. You can't have the CIA spying on sitting members of the United States Senate. Not supposed to happen. Not a single person was arrested. So you have a bunch of Republicans and Democrats in office that believe that these agencies are operating in good faith, even though time and time again, these agencies show that they're not necessarily operating in good faith, that they're being run not by public servants, but by ideologues looking to push a political agenda. People who believe that they exist and we exist to serve them, as opposed to them being in public service and existing to serve us. Not Republican, not Democrat, just all Americans. And there's a lot of people, politicians, the people in office that could actually hold the bureaucracy accountable, that still will give the benefit of the doubt to the bureaucracy. See, I'm opposite. You never give government the benefit of the doubt. You have to remain skeptical to try and keep them honest. It doesn't mean that I'm saying we need an overthrow of government or anything like that. Okay, but we do need accountability. We do need a small bureaucracy. And it's our civic obligation to always question the policies of government. Why are they doing it? Even if you agree with the policies, why are they doing it? Is those policies necessary? Who do those policies benefit? Ask those questions. We have to hold these people accountable. And unfortunately, too many don't.
That's why they're trying to foster a culture of just fall in line with everything we say.
Exactly.
You have any other questions, Chris, before maybe we end it with tweets of the week? I got two.
Yeah, I don't have any tweets of the week, but no, I'm good for now.
Okay.
This has been very informative and fun, Nick, I got to say.
So Nick, we enjoy the conversations.
We do a segment where we pick like the craziest tweets of the week, and then we read them, or maybe the funniest tweets of the week, and we read them. So Chris didn't find it. We did take a break last week, so it's all right.
I'm kind of in an algorithm hole right now.
Yes.
All I see is the guy from Young Turks and Joe Biden, and who's that chick who
Nina Turner.
It's the only three people I see. I need to really change the algorithm.
So Nina Turner is on a roll, right? And we're going to start off with Nina Turner, unfortunately. And she tweeted the other day, FYI, student debt cancellation isn't paid for by taxpayers. The federal government is the lender. It's costlier for the government to hold on to the debt.
How? What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, this is so bad.
She doesn't know who funds the federal government.
Yeah,
she's truly insane. This woman, truly insane.
Maybe yeah. I used to like her years ago, and I've come to learn she's just a hardcore activist. Maybe a little bit nefarious, making a career of it. Like maybe she thinks the government makes cookies.
No, but those are the people I'm telling you about. Like we'll sit there and we'll say people are smart and they're nefarious. No, they're not. See, that's the thing. Like they'll put out something like that, which shows you how dumb they really are.
Yeah, definitely. I got another one. This one is going to be interesting for you, Nick. This was a little bit of a controversy. And this was from the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. They're a little bit off the wall. I won't lie. I like it. But they tweeted on August 25th, Happy Holidays. And it's a picture of Meghan McCain crying over John McCain's casket. That's the day, I guess, the anniversary of his death. I don't know. What do you think about this? This has kind of been
pretty ruthless.
It's pretty ruthless, right? And I know why the Libertarian Party has done it, right? Because they're severely anti-war and view him as a warmongering person responsible for
what I don't know. I mean, first of all, I disagree. They shouldn't have put that out there because whatever argument they're trying to make, they kind of just lose it because nobody understands. I don't believe that he died August 25th. I think on August 25th, I think that's when maybe the 13 soldiers in Afghanistan, when we were withdrawing, I think that's when they died, I think, if I'm correct. I may have my dates a little bit off. But maybe they were mocking the war faction, the neocons.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Afghanistan.
Failing, yeah.
We had 13 service members killed, spent 20 years there, $1 trillion, 2,500 soldiers killed, 20,000 wounded, and the Taliban took over the country in a week.
In an hour, yeah.
So I just Googled it. He did pass on August 25th, 2018. So that was, I guess, what the tweet was about.
Yeah, see, stuff like that. I mean, I don't think that's not going to gain you any supporters.
Yeah,
it's kind of like when former President Trump goes out there and says certain things where it's like, that's not going to gain you any supporters. So why even say it? Like the name of the game in politics is to gain supporters, right? You want to grow your base, get more people to support you, get more people to get out and vote for you. So you don't want to alienate people because let's face it, you can fire up your base all you want. They're already voting for you.
Right.
So you got to get the new voters in. So let's say the election. I could tell you, even without saying fraud in Georgia and Wisconsin and Michigan and all those places, it was a scam election. You had all the mail-in balloting taking place. You had the whole way we vote changed, never before done. We can't even put a road together, right? We already spoke about that. Yeah, we're going to change the entire way we vote in a matter of months. And we know about the Zuckerbucks that went in. $400 million was used to take over local election operations. We're now learning the FBI was assisting in suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story. I mean, so we know the scam that was played. However, every time President Trump goes out there and talks about the election of 2020, he's not going to win over any voters. He should let other people talk about that.
Yeah, I agree.
Instead, he should remind the voters, hey, the economy was a little bit better under me, right? You paying $2 for a gallon of gas, right? Your home heating bills were 1/3 of what you're going to be paying this year. That wins you voters. So that's where, this Libertarian Party tweet, it's not going to help you gain supporters. If you want to gain supporters, well, simply expose that the bigger government has gotten, the more difficult our lives have become, right? The whole point of libertarianism is for less government control. So just show the bigger government gets, the more problems we as a people have in our lives, the more complicated our lives have become, and not a single problem has been solved. They would have been better served doing that than doing the McCain.
Yeah, that was, to be clear, that was the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, not the Libertarian National Party.
Yeah.
It's, they don't have control over the different little organizations, right? So yeah,
I'm conservative, but there's a libertarian streak within me, and obviously John Brennan thinks libertarians are domestic terrorists. He lumped them in with anarchists and white supremacists and all that.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things, and this is where I think that just a lot of people they want to be the bomb throwers because that's what gets attention. But the reality is, you could get that attention, but if it's not building out your base of support, then what's the point?
Just like Kathy Hochul telling all the MAGA people to leave New York, the state isn't for you.
Wow. Yeah. Horrible person she is.
Yep.
I know, that is so crazy. That maybe I'll end it here on this point, but for all the crazy shit I've seen Trump say over the years, for the most part, I was telling you before this, Chris, I don't really remember President Trump going after your common Democrat person, like punching down at a normal person. He never did. Journalists, he went after politicians, other people of noteworthy. I never remember him saying all Democrat voters are deplorables or evil or something like that. But we saw with the guy who's going to be running against Ron DeSantis, I think he made a similar comment. Kathy Hochul. I mean, they're just talking about half the population, I guess, roughly, or at least the voting base.
70 million people. Yeah.
I never minded when President Trump went after anyone that criticized him. Never minded it. And, it's politics. It's a brutal sport. The only time I ever said that I disagreed or I didn't like what Trump said was when he called the press the enemy of the people. And I know that there's viewers out there that'll be like, well, they are the enemy of the people. When we start labeling people as enemies, you can't work with the enemy. Once someone is an enemy, you're not going to sit there, negotiate and compromise to try and get things done or to try and deconstruct and make government less powerful. When you start labeling everyone an enemy, then you start looking at them as evil, right? And you can't sit there and negotiate with evil. He would have been better served to expose them for the political activists that they are nothing more than the mouthpiece for the Democrat National Committee. That's what he should have done rather than say enemy of the people. I think that turns off a lot of just regular voters, the people that aren't heavily engaged in politics, the ones that don't pay attention to it day in, day out. When they hear rhetoric like that, I think it turns them off. That's why if you look right now, the Republicans, I think the reason that the red wave may be a little bit limited is because the midterm elections is turning on all about Trump, right? That's what Democrats want. They want to make it a referendum on Trump rather than Republicans make it a referendum on the guy that's actually in office and that has screwed up our lives so dramatically, made our lives so much more difficult. And unfortunately, Republicans are falling for the trap because they constantly will go out there and Trump will be the top question. If I was a Republican running for office and a reporter asked me a question about Trump, I'd say, listen, Trump's not in office. Okay, so let's talk about the guy that's in office. Let's talk about gas prices still being at $3.90 a gallon. Let's talk about how people are going to go broke when they have to fill up their home heating oil tanks in the Northeast this winter. Let's talk about the disaster of our foreign policy and how Afghanistan is now controlled. The Taliban is better armed and equipped today than they were when we first went involved in 2001. And again, you bring up those arguments, you'll be better served and you'll gain support. But the more you make it about a personality, about one person or Biden and Trump, it's not going to work out well. I think that's what a lot of people will just say, you know what, screw it. I'm just not going to vote for anyone. Why bother?
Yeah, they'll be turned off or demoralized, which I think is also a goal of a lot.
It is a goal, of course.
Yeah, demoralization of the population. Was it Yuri Brezhnev, right? Talked about Soviet Union and their.
I mean, like, why are we even having the abortion talk in New York? Like, it's completely irrelevant. It's not like abortion's going to change whether whether Zeldin gets in or not. If he becomes the governor, he still has a full Democrat assembly. That's not switching over. The Senate is unlikely to switch over. So why are we even talking? Well, the media wants to push the abortion debate. Democrats want to push the abortion.
The only
debate.
place they can win
Is because that's the place they could win. And you know, and it's amazing in a state where pretty much you have taxpayer funded abortions that you get up to like 9 months. The fact that we're even saying that abortion is illegal in New York is completely ridiculous. It doesn't meet reality, and yet you have the morons out there that will believe it.
Yeah. I think most people are starting to wake up to that, though. I think there's behind the scenes, people are starting to realize it ain't exactly what it's. I think, you know, never wanted to hear, but I think, you know, the overturning of Roe versus Wade is actually going to calm that whole situation and argument in America, because it's been hyperpolarized since Roe v. Wade.
Again, Republicans shouldn't even be talking about abortion.
No.
Don't care what state they're in. And if I get a question about abortion, I'm going to say there's not as many people as you think getting abortion in our state.
Right.
However, if we look at crime, that actually is going to impact our lives. Like if you can't walk down the street without fear of getting knocked out or stabbed or shot, that's a problem. If you feel like a prisoner in your home, that's a problem. When you're releasing violent felons that have a rap sheet that's 9, 10, 15 pages long, and you don't even set bail for them, that's a bigger problem. So stop asking questions about abortion. Let's talk about other issues that are actually impacting everyone in society, not just one particular
goddamn bigot you are. Jesus Christ. Never having you on again.
Look, man, I'll tell you, I that's funny that you made that point there, because I was down in the Bronx this past weekend at my dad's house, and I was with my young baby. She's 8 months old, and my cousin's like, hey, let's walk down to Carvel and go get ice cream. I'm not gonna lie, in the back of my head, I'm like, do I want to walk, 10 blocks in the Bronx with my baby? Who knows what could happen? Some shootout could occur or whatever.
Where just 15 years ago, that same community in the Bronx, you would have walked without a thought in the world.
Yeah, exactly. So that is what people should be really focused on. Not, we can't get an abortion in New York while we can. It's completely a lie.
Listen, to me, about when it comes to the whole abortion issue, I'm sorry. I know I'm a guy, but in this day and age, I mean, if we can't define the difference between men and women, then men can talk about these issues. But seriously, I think for most people, I don't care if they're a woman, a man, I don't care if how old they are. Most people are going to look at their economic livelihoods. This is just politics 101 before any other issue. And if you make their lives more difficult economically, you should be punished in the polls for that. Now, that used to be the common logic, right? Again, today we operate on emotions. So you have people where their economic livelihoods being destroyed, their social livelihoods being destroyed because of the increase in crime. But then I see something like, well, I got to vote Democrat because I want my daughter to have the opportunity to have an abortion if she needs one. I'm just sitting there like that's devoid from reality.
To be the most like thing you're focused on of all the things.
Well,
it's an odd flex, weird flex. It
is, and it's so you're sitting there saying that you're going to vote on something that your daughter may not use or may use. Who knows? We don't know. We can't predict the future.
Or your son.
You should ask your daughter if she would have liked to have been aborted. Just wondering. But you're going to say that that's the most important issue, as you can't pay your electric bill. Interesting. And then there is an old expression in politics, you get what you deserve. So if this is the direction our country is really moving in, then we get what we deserve and we will collapse. Unfortunately, those that are responsible will get shafted in the process. But wait, I'm already getting shafted because I consolidated my student loans to a private loan, and now I'm screwed.
Yep.
Full circle, like we said before. Got any other questions, Chris, before you sign us off?
I'm good. This has been a hell of a conversation, man. Good. You good, Skaggs?
I'm good, man.
All right,
Professor Giordano, thanks for coming on, man. Honestly, you are a breath of fresh air for me sometimes. Kind of get me out of the Ancapistan, the anarchist libertarian part of me, and bring me back into reality of what's going on. So
you need to start doing like PR for like Republican candidates, because they just go out there and allowed to say what, like I'm still like I'm wondering like who writes like
they're morons so many.
Yeah, like who writes half these speeches for like the Kamala Harris and stuff like that. I'm a woman in a blue suit. I know your PR person did not say that. Like, you need to start like getting out there and like telling politicians what to say.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, too many of them are so arrogant and they're so dumb that that's why we're in the position we're in today.
So, Nick, thank you. Shout out your show, where everybody can find you, what they need to do. Please tell all the Doom Nation where they can find you.
Everyone could go to PASReport.com, on social media at PAS Report, or just type in Nicholas Giordano in any search engine, and I should be the first one that comes up.
Awesome.
I'll appear somewhere.
Yeah. Nick, thank you so much for coming on yet again and bringing us to school for another class.
Thanks for the invite. Always enjoy it.
Of course, man.